Hey everybody, welcome back to this video series on doing the part swap between two systems. A silver system that originally had the AMD FX 8120 CPU, and this black system here which originally had the AMD Phenom 2 Quad 925 CPU. So I'll put a card up in the upper right corner, that way you can go back and start from the beginning if you haven't been keeping up on this video series. But let me just say that this whole project, particularly with this black system, has taken so many turns. So it started out with what was supposed to be a simple hardware swap. Turns out with this ASRock motherboard installed, I could not use the original liquid cooling system that was in this black case, so I rigged up this water cooling loop instead. And then I started having stability problems with this motherboard and CPU, the FX 8120. I thought for sure that maybe the FX 8120 CPU was possibly having issues because it did spend a good bit of its lifespan overclocked. But in the previous part, I swapped in a Phenom 2 6-core CPU, and the stability problems are still there. I swapped the power supply beforehand, and well, that didn't really make it. Actually, that did help a little bit, but I think what's going on is this motherboard could have some issues, maybe with capacitors failing or something that's causing instability to the CPU. Probably an unstable power supply on board. Who knows? So what we're going to do in this part is we're swapping in a different motherboard. I got this motherboard off of eBay, and gotta get this bag opened. It's actually fully sealed. Okay, so this motherboard that we have here is an Asus model M5A 99X Evo R2.0 socket AM3 Plus motherboard. So this motherboard definitely supports the FX 8120 CPU, but also it is backwards compatible with socket AM3 CPUs. So I could use either the FX 8120 on this, or I could use that Phenom 2 6-core. So we're going to actually use the FX 8120 on this. That will tell me if the CPU is in fact bad, or if it's okay, which I'm leading to think it's probably okay. So this motherboard has a UEFI BIOS. It does appear to have TPM, but we know it's not TPM 2.0, therefore it doesn't meet the Microsoft Elite Class Mill System requirements from Windows 11. But that's aside the point. So it's a motherboard, again a used pull. Unfortunately, does not have an IO shield plate, guys. It just irritates me when system refurbishers fail to hang on to the IO shield plates. I get it, sometimes they get lost along the line, and it may not be the eBay seller's fault, but I'm willing to bet that this eBay seller, considering their listings, he or she has a lot of listings, motherboards and stuff for sale, leads me to believe that this is what they do. Please, if you're doing this, by all means, try the best you can to retain the IO shield plates. Come on. That being said, first we got to go ahead and take out the motherboard, CPU, and RAM that's in this thing. And to do that, we have to get the liquid cooling system out of the way. And I'm thinking what I can do is I can take this base plate loose, which is what the pump sits on, and I can take loose the CPU water block. Once I get the video card out, should be able to maneuver this out of the way. Hopefully we can do it without causing any leaks. Hopefully we won't have to drain the system. Anyways, I'm going to start by taking out the video card. Okay, so our 6770 card is out. We'll set it to the side because we'll be reinstalling that later. Now I'm going to go ahead and take loose the pump. Again, it just rests on this platform, which is actually a 3.5 or 2.5 inch dry bed after I repurposed for this use. Alright, so we get the pump loose, it can just dangle right there. We're going to take the CPU block loose. Alright, so let's see if we can move this out of the way for now. We'll just have to work around it. If this was silicone tubing, it would probably be easier to bend and maneuver, but it's vinyl tubing, so there you have it. So be careful not to scratch the surface on the block. Matter of fact, I think I may be able to tip this thing on its side. Be really careful with it. That's actually going to work out a little bit better, because I can actually move the block off to the side. Hopefully won't put too much strain on the connections, get any seepage. Now, okay, much better. I'm going to pull this motherboard out of here. I'm actually going to go ahead and remove that CPU. It'll fit onto X6. It's kind of hard to see. Let me readjust the camera here. Yes, I paid just $30 for the CPU on eBay. And that being said, if it's not needed for this system, I think I know where it's going to end up going. We're going to save our RAM modules since we're going to transfer those over to the other board eventually. Okay, so I need to go ahead and disconnect all our connections for our fans and all that good stuff. Okay, so this board is now out. Another observation, the eBay seller also failed to include the CPU retention bracket for the heatsink. It's like, come on. Now, mind you, the seller did provide a pretty accurate photo of this board, so I mean, it came as pictured, but still, not everybody has an AMD CPU core retention bracket kicking around to attach your heatsink to. And it's important to note that a lot of water blocks out there, including this Heatcure 3.0, make use of the factory backplate. So if someone was buying this motherboard and they did not have an existing motherboard kicking around with a retention bracket, they would have to purchase separately a retention bracket. Who knows, maybe the seller had it listed for sale separately, which I think would be a greedy thing to do. There's another word I could use, but I'm not going to use it here on the channel. Get this lined up into place. So I can worry about the retention bracket, or at least the back plate later, because this case has a hole in the back for access. So that being said, I can go ahead and just drop this motherboard into place. Funny thing is, I'm going to have to replace the drives because, well, these are IDE drives. And of course, this motherboard does not have IDE because it's an 900 series chipset board. So I'm going to have to put a SATA DVD burner back in this thing. I put these in there because, well, I had a crap ton of them and I was trying to get rid of them in a way. But anyways, let's go ahead and bolt this motherboard into place. Okay, since we're going to use the FX8120 processor on this one, let's go ahead and drop it in. See, this motherboard here was actually built to support that CPU, whereas the old 890FX Deluxe 4 board was not. I mean, it supported it with the BIOS flash, but there's a difference there. Okay, now it's a matter of plugging up these cables. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and install the CPU water block and mount the pump back into the system. So I gotta get the back plate back where it's supposed to go. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and install the CPU water block. Okay, so it's back together somewhat. Back together enough for a test run, and it runs. So off camera I did a couple of things. Well, I had to change out the fan on the radiator because, well, of course this motherboard does not support 3-pin fan control. It only supports 4-pin fan control. So unfortunately that nice Dell server fan I had to rip off there and put this on there. That's actually one of the good fans off of the AMD FX branded liquid cooling system. So I may have to buy a new 120mm fan with a 4-pin connection for it in the future, depending on what I install it on. But so I got that in there and it's running. Don't have any Windows just yet, but it's running. And here it is in the UEFI. You can see we got our 16 gigs of RAM there. I had to reseat one of the RAM modules because it wasn't detecting it originally, but and of course, being the FX8120, it's going to run a little warmer, but it seems like it's doing pretty well just sitting here in the UEFI. So this, I would say, is an earlier UEFI BIOS. It kind of looks, I mean, look at the text. It doesn't have the super advanced text like what you have in newer UEFI firmwares. The text looks very similar to that of an older BIOS. Maybe it could be because of the video card in this. I don't know for sure. It's got the Radeon HD 6770. So, I mean, again, earlier UEFI stuff, so it ain't exactly the same as what we have now. So right now, not sure why it's funny, the CPU bus frequency is at 216. It's like it's overclocking the CPU just a tad bit. Now when I put this together, the first boot up, it said new CPU detected. So obviously it recognizes a different processor. So yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to throw it into Windows and see if it will run stable. There's the OC tuner. Hit OK on that. Let's just see what it does. Let's get back into the firmware. It just overclocked it to 3.9 gigahertz. Holy cow. So you could just, you hit that OC tuner and it would just automatically go in and overclock stuff. Alright, let's see here. Go into advanced mode. You have to do this every time you go into the BIOS on this thing. It's got the bus way up at 250. Jeez. I mean, literally, you click OC tuner and it automatically just overclocks everything. Yeah, I would be very curious to see if it runs stable like that. Now, this CPU, I used to run at 4.2 gigahertz when I was in the Mid-Tower Lux years ago. Now, of course, this is an unlock. It is an unlocked CPU. Right now I'm just kind of just messing around here. So you can see things are warming up just a little bit. At least according to the motherboard sensor. Air coming out the back is just a tad bit warm. It's almost like this CPU is actually running cooler on this motherboard than it did on the 890FX Deluxe 4. So I'm curious. Just let's see if it will run stable with its overclock settings it just applied. So let's go ahead and exit and try to get into Windows. The SSD on this still has Windows 11 on it. We'll just save our changes and exit. It was trying to go into the automatic repair mode because it crashed previously. And of course, it's booting up on different hardware, so it's going to have to auto configure everything. And you can see it's absolutely screaming. Here we are at the desktop. Of course, I don't have the latest hotfix installed, so go to performance. It still needs to install drivers. Here we are in Windows 11. It's running fine. Something that did not happen previously. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in our internet connection and let this thing download drivers. So it seems that the motherboard was the culprit. That 890FX Deluxe 4 motherboard, there's something going wrong with it. Probably with the CPU power delivery. Because, I mean, at stock settings it should run stable, but it was behaving as if it was overclocked and it was not stable. But here it is running just fine. And if it continues to run fine, I might see what I can do with this thing. I might see if we could get that CPU up to 4.2 gigahertz like it used to be. It would definitely be a space heater at that point for sure. But and of course it's funny, you know, how this system here doesn't meet the Microsoft Elite class meal system requirements from Windows 11. But here it is running Windows 11. Again, still needs to install drivers and all that good stuff. I can see we're missing graphics drivers for one thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with this thing, and I'll continue once I've got the drivers downloaded and installed and all that good stuff. I'm probably going to do a part 7, which is really going to be just a wrap up of this whole series of videos, showing y'all what I've done to the Mid-Tower Deluxe Junior, which is the silver system. I think now I'm going to start calling it the Mid-Tower Deluxe Junior. And this one, I'm not sure what I'm going to call it, but I still got to change out the drives in this one, the optical drives. I'm going to put a SATA one back in there so this thing have a working optical drive. But yeah, so here it is running. It's installing drivers now, I see, from what Device Manager is doing. And here it is running just fine. So I'm going to say that the CPU is okay. It was bad board. Which is unfortunate, because this was a nice board back in its day. It wasn't exactly a cheap board, that was for sure. I paid a pretty good penny for it back when I bought it brand new in 2012. So I'm thinking it has to do with probably the CPU power delivery, something like that. Something definitely going on with it. What was weird is it seemed to run a little more stable in the silver tower, but even then I was having issues with it. Just they didn't really show up as much, which is kind of odd. But anyway, yeah, I meant to mention, so in a previous part of this whole series, I temporarily had installed an AMD Athlon 2 dual-core CPU on this thing, which the dual-core, it was a little 45-watt TDP processor, so it hardly had much of any demand for power, and it was running fine on this. But of course the FX8120 is a 125-watt TDP processor, and that Phenom 2 6-core is a 95-watt TDP processor. So those had a little bit higher demand for power, and well, there you have it. Apparently the VRM on this motherboard, something's definitely going on with it. For sure, I don't know. There's thermal pesos out there, but I don't think that was really causing any issue. I have to clean that up, and who knows. I mean, you can't rule that out as a possibility, but it's really weird. Really weird. But we now have a socket AM3 Plus motherboard in this thing, which better supports that FX8120 processor. Obviously, it was built for the AMD FX series processors, unlike the other board, which required a BIOS flash. Let's go and restart this thing. Of course, it's installing updates. What a shocker. Going to continue installing updates on. There we go. And there's a desktop. I mean, you can see runs pretty dang well. And of course, yet this computer fails to meet the Microsoft Elite class minimum system requirements to run Windows 11, but it runs Windows 11 just fine. It It's another example of what Microsoft deems e-waste in 2025. Yet, you can see it's still very well capable. It might heat your house pretty well. I mean, the aircon at the back of this thing is a little warm. But yeah, there you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and take some time to finish this thing up, get the optical drive swapped out. I'm going to do that off camera. I'm not going to bore you out with that. But get those drives swapped out, get the cables tidied up, do a couple of things here and there, and finally get to wrap it up with this machine. Okay, everybody, so I got the black system finally finished up. Yeah, it seemed like it was never going to happen, but here we are. We got the replacement motherboard in there, and we have the FX8120 back in there. And the FX8120 runs good and stable. I think it runs a little cooler too. Not to mention it's actually overclocked a little bit. You see I got the side panel and everything back on. Let's go ahead and start this thing up. And yes, it still has Windows 11 on it. Okay, so here we are on Windows 11. And I've done a few things to it. I haven't quite finished up customization just yet because I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to even keep Windows 11 on this thing, but it all depends on who this machine ends up going to. It could go to my neighbor next door who recently moved in this past year and doesn't have a desktop computer. It could go to him, or it could go to to a friend of mine who's also needing a newer system. Which, I mean, this machine here is definitely much better than what they have. Let's go ahead and go in here and turn on dark mode. So you can see this computer here that's running Windows 11, despite not meeting the Microsoft Elite Class minimum system requirements to run Windows 11, is running Windows 11 quite well. Pull up Task Manager here. Now what's weird is how Task Manager reports this frequency, but yeah, if I go pull up CPU-Z, you can see here it's showing almost 3.9 gigahertz, which was the overclock that was done earlier in the video. So yeah, this is like the automatic overclock setting that this motherboard has, and you can see it based the overclock off of the bus. And of course this is an unlocked CPU, so the processor could be overclocked using the multiplier by increasing the multiplier. Matter of fact, when this CPU was in the Metal Lux quite some time back, that's how I overclocked it. But isn't this weird? So I'll put this right here, and I'll put Task Manager right there. It's kind of odd how they're showing two different numbers. Not sure what the deal is there. That's kind of weird. Very weird, actually. But let's see if I go into control panel and attempt to pull up the classic system properties, which may or may not work. It really depends. Even if we do get the newer settings properties, I'm curious to see what it says. You see it pulls up the newer settings. Showing 3.1 gigahertz, which is the base clock. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Not really sure what's up with that. It's kind of an interesting one, to be honest. But I mean, it runs relatively stable. Well, I haven't had any issues with it crashing or nothing like that. I'll show you another funny thing about this FX8120 is its temperature sensors, or at least the integrated temperature sensor, has been bogus. I mean, 7 degrees Celsius, that's absolute crap. There's no way that it's idling at 7 degrees Celsius. There's just simply no way. I mean, it's almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit in this room. So there's no way the CPU is going to idle well lower than the ambient temperature of the room, let alone the ambient temperature inside the case. Which is what the radiator on this is actually getting air from. It's actually pulling air through the case and out the back. I know some people will say, oh, you should have it venting in, but I mean, I'm doing this trying to help promote airflow through the case, which either way it would do. But you can see, like for example, our GPU is idling at 45 degrees Celsius. Our data storage hard drive is idling at 22 degrees Celsius. So you look at this and you look at that, obviously, I mean, it doesn't add up. The temperature reported by the motherboard says 27 degrees Celsius. It's funny, it's the CPU motherboard temps, or they're about the same. Now this thing is just sitting there idle, not doing much anything. But that's another interesting thing to note is with this socket AM3 Plus motherboard, the FX8120 has ran cooler than it ever has. Now I can imagine, I think I remember seeing some comments in previous videos featuring the FX8120, at least here on QQ channel. When I mentioned this thing being a space heater, like, really, a space heater? I mean, it is a warm running CPU because obviously it's a 125 watt TDP. But for some reason with the original ASRock motherboard that it was installed on, it always just ran super hot. And I mean, the voltage, like for example the V core, you can see it's setting at 1.35. Now the motherboard, the old ASRock motherboard, I would have it set to the default voltage, and it would, for some reason, it just seemed to run warmer on that board. I mean, before I replaced the motherboard in this system here, I do recall the air coming out the back of this radiator getting much warmer and filling the tubes, and they would get much warmer. But now it runs as cool as can be. You can see the fans running at a low speed. It's not doing much anything, just pulling a little bit of air out the back. Yeah, guys, finally, I guess I can say this thing is good to go. I'm going to do a few more things with Windows, and depending on who this goes to, I could end up putting Windows 10 back on it. Who knows? Have not had any more issues with the cooling system. No more seepage, no more leakage, none of that. Holding up just fine. One thing I did go ahead and do off camera was I took some rubberized flashing material that I had left over. It's a sticky flashing. It's sticky on one side and it's rubberized. What I did is I wrapped these two tubes right here, so that way they wouldn't rub against the metal part of the case and scratch up and possibly wear through. in the future. But now, I mean, it's running as fine as can be. Running Windows 11 really well again, despite not meeting those Microsoft Elite class requirements. So anyways, that wraps it up for this one, and I'm going to do a part, I think it's going to be part 7, which will be just a brief wrap-up showing this system as well as the silver system, which will now be known as the Mid-Tower Lux Junior. And it too is going to end up going to somebody here pretty soon. So I got this machine here. I've got the Junior down there, which you can see Hewlett and Jenny are sitting on top of right now. And we got the Sleeper HP build there with the Core 2 Quad Q6600 and GTS 450 GPU. Those are all going to somebody pretty soon. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to CubeComputer channel, and be sure to tick the bell, that way you get notified of new video posts. Also, I recommend following CubeComputer Company on Facebook. A link is in the video description. In addition to computer tech videos, I have a second channel, CubeCompMTDX. Links are available at the end of this video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching and your support.